Now, here's a question as the church remembers and celebrates Thomas the Apostle, which is tomorrow. Here's a question. The question is this: how is your faith these days? How is your faith these days? I wonder. We often call Thomas doubting Thomas because our first impressions is because not being there when Jesus first appears to the disciples, he declares, I'm not going to believe it until I see it. And yet, what we see when he's there the second time and he sees Jesus, and we wonder whether he really did put his fingers on the scars. We don't know. But what we see is Jesus, rather than condemning Thomas for his doubt, actually commends him for his faith. And then, as Janet read to us, we see the writer to the Hebrews gives us that line. It's sort of chapter 11 and verse 1. That line which we all know well. Faith is being confident of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. And it all sounds so good when things are going well. But what about when things are tough? When life is a struggle, when events blindside us and just turn our world upside down? What then of faith? I'm sure we've all encountered and may even have been one ourselves, those well-meaning people who say, in the midst of those sort of life crises, those well-meaning people who say, don't worry, you just need more faith. It'll all work out. And we might think, if only it were that simple. And yet, we know most of the time it's not. So today, I thought it might be a little bit of fun to rethink together what faith, a deep-seated and a deep-rooted faith, might mean and might look like for us today. Now, I know as we journey through this, some of you might say, well, at some point it might all break down. But let's just see where this goes for the next sort of, 10 minutes or so as we try to rethink faith and see it from a different perspective. I'm sure most, if not all of us, will have grown up with the idea that faith meant simply accepting or agreeing with those sort of big ideas and concepts about God. That faith is all about my belief in God, even if or when things just don't make sense or sort of match our experience. And thinking like this as we read the Bible and as we consider some of those sort of great men and women of faith, if we see faith as our accepting or agreeing with those big concepts of God, then when we look at people in the Bible, we can find ourselves thinking, I can never have a faith like theirs. I could never have a faith that would move mountains. I could never trust God like they do, and so could never do the things they did. But today, I want us to sort of squint a little, turn our gaze, and look at all of this from a slightly different perspective. I want to start by asking the question, what if it's just the opposite? What if it's just the opposite? What if it's not so much about our faith in God, but more about his faith in us? I'm sure when we were little, or maybe even not so little, we've been encouraged by those people who have drawn alongside us when things have been difficult, and they've said things like, "Oh, I know you can do it." A school sports day, that first driving test, stepping out into a new job or even into retirement, facing a major life crises, whatever it might be, we've all known people who have drawn alongside us and who have said with a genuine love, care, and support, "You can do it. I believe in you. Go on. I know you can." And we found that their belief in us, their faith in us, we found that to be an encourager and an enabler, spurring us on, supporting us through. So, what if faith is more about God's faith in us? What if faith is our experience of God desiring us, calling us, connecting, reconnecting with us? What if God's faith in us is a call and an encouragement for us to live as fully as we can manage in the present moment? What if, in those times of utter lostness, struggle, and temptation, instead of us feeling we just wished we had more faith, what if we heard or we imagined God saying to us, "Go on. I know you can do it. I believe in you. I have faith in you." I wonder if we understood faith more in that way. I wonder what difference might it make? Too often, our old way of thinking about faith tells us that having faith means that we cannot have any doubts or questions. But what if our new way of thinking about faith simply means our being willing to live with the uncertainty and unanswered questions in the midst of the present? What if having faith isn't about having or even needing to have the answers, but simply an invitation for us to live with the questions? Which then means we're able to see our questions not so much as failures of faith, but as invitations to a deeper relationship with God, who says, "I know you can. I have all faith in you." Too often, our old way of thinking about faith tells us that faith is something that we need somehow to manufacture or amass. You just need more faith, some people might say to us. But that just leaves us facing the question, how? How do I get more faith? But our new way of thinking about faith would remind us that it's not the quantity of our faith that's important. It's not more faith, but it's our small faith, well placed, if I can put it like that. Which then helps us to think that maybe what Jesus says about faith being as small as a mustard seed might be true. For maybe it's not about our trying to get more faith. Maybe faith is something we've already been given, something that's innate within us. And we simply need to acknowledge our little faith in God, which then acknowledges his great faith in us. Which means then our faith doesn't need to be sufficient enough for us to overcome whatever it is we're facing today or whatever we might have to face into the future. Rather, our faith just needs to be enough to know that God is. As God said to Moses at the burning bush, "I am. I am all you need, all you'll ever need." and I have faith that you can. And looking at faith from this perspective, so we start to see that Thomas, rather than being the disciple we don't want to be like, because no one wants to admit their doubts, rather, as we look at faith, squinting and looking a bit sideways as we have this morning, looking at faith from this perspective shows us that Thomas is an example to follow. For he didn't need to have all the questions answered, but was willing to allow the questions to draw him into a deeper relationship with God. Jesus says to him, "Blessed are you, Thomas." He didn't try to increase his stockpile of faith, but rather noted that his small faith simply needed to be rooted in the fact that God had faith in him. Hearing God say, "I know you can. I have faith in you." How's your faith these days? How's your faith these days? And how might this broadening of our understanding of faith make a difference in your life today? It's not so much that we need to have such a faith that means we've got no doubts or uncertainties or questions. It's not so much that we need to keep getting more and more faith. We have a little, and we just need to place it in the God who has a great faith in us and who says to you and to me today, "Go on, I know you can." Amen.